Outrage overtook the nation earlier this year as we learned that local, state, and federal officials knew about Flint, Michigan's lead-contaminated water supply for nearly a year, but they did nothing to address the deadly problem. But few took note when people converged in Washington to protest radioactive pollution affecting the water of thousands of Native American communities. Even though the level of contamination is far higher and has persisted much longer than the crisis in Flint, there was barely a peep from the mainstream media. Now, since the 1950s, waste from active and inactive uranium mines has seeped into the Navajo Nation's water supplies, which has led to the increased rates of cancer, genetic defects, Navajo DNA depletion, and increases in early mortality. Now, the material that fed the Cold War by making atomic bombs possible is also found in low concentrations of ore, making its runoff a toxic sludge containing other harmful elements like arsenic and lead. Now, it's not just uranium mines that's made the Navajo Nation's water so dangerous, though. Dirty coal-fired power plants have also been major polluters of both water and air throughout the 27,000 square miles that the Navajo Nation occupies in the Southwest. The latest assault, though, on their water came just last year when acid mine drainage, yes, acid, entered the Animas and San Juan rivers following the EPA's reckless attempts to address long-standing issues with the abandoned Gold King mine in Colorado. The spill was so severe that parts of the river turned a bright gold within a day, and the affected area, which passes through 3 states, which has since been declared a disaster zone. The Navajo Nation certainly isn't alone in their fight against repeated violations of the sanctity of their land. Now, the largest proposed mining project in the continent could soon destroy other multiple Native tribes. In December of 2014, we at MintPress reported on a last-minute provision tucked into the National Defense Authorization Act, which would allow for the creation of the continent's largest copper mine in protected national forest in Arizona, part of which includes lands considered sacred by multiple Native American communities. Now, the land at hand involves Oak Flat and Apache Leap, sacred ancestral lands in parts of the Tonto National Forest from which Apache communities had been forcibly removed. And in 1955, federal law closed the land to mining out of respect for the Apache's spiritual ties to the land and concerns about water safety. The plan for the proposed copper mine at the time had been rejected by Congress and even opposed by tribes for years. Yet once it was hidden away in the fine print of the mammoth annual document that funds the Pentagon, the previously protected Apache land could soon be handed over to Resolution Copper Mining, and these tribes could soon face a water poisoning disaster that's far worse than Flint, and one comparable to the Navajo Nations. It's important to consider who snuck the policy rider into the NDAA. 2 of the plan's greatest champions are none other than Arizona Republican Senators John McCain and Jeff Flake. Both of them have received campaign contributions from Rio Tinto, the British-Australian mining giant which owns Resolution Copper. Flake even worked as a lobbyist for Rio Tinto. And indeed, the law does mandate environmental impact studies and tribal consultations, but here's the deal. The law is worded in a way that Resolution would receive the land for mining regardless of the outcomes of those environmental assessments and consultations. Now, what's worse, though, is that the law doesn't include any penalties, none, for the company for any future environmental or cultural harms in the area, leaving the Apaches themselves, not the mining giant nor the lawmakers, to deal with the aftermath. And once the scope of the provision became apparent, Apaches decided to occupy Oak Flat. They stayed there for months last summer, refusing to leave, and their tenacity ignited a growing movement against the land swap, with over 100,000 signatures on a Stop Apache Land Grab petition to the White House, and at least 1 million other people calling on Congress to repeal the deal. Now, only time will tell what the impact of this pushback will be. People have enormous power, but unfortunately, so do corporations and the lawmakers who support them instead of working for the public they're elected to represent. If the mine begins operating, it seems almost inevitable that the effects will play out as dangerously as they have for the Navajo Nation. And just like the people of Flint, Apaches and Navajos will have to scramble to secure emergency supplies of fresh drinking water. But unlike Flint, their plight will go largely unnoticed by the mainstream media. And Madonna and Michael Moore won't be sending in bottled water by the busload to Apache school children. Racism against Native Americans will persist as America's silent genocide of Native communities continues.